All right, let's see. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on what time zone you're in. Let me pull up this Facebook page really briefly so I can discuss this. There are a lot of comments on this Facebook post. Let me jump up to the top. Okay, so this Facebook post actually references another Facebook post that was made this morning. The first one sort of exploded so quickly. One of the page owner or moderator admin sort of took one of the comments out of that original post and created another post. And this happened, I don't know, maybe 30 minutes ago. There's already like 150 comments on it. And so I'm going to read it. So this Facebook page or forum, Trucking Rates and Lanes. And if you're, I think it sort of leans towards owner operators. It's far better than rate per mile bullshitters, right? Far better than that. The thing that a lot of people fail to understand in the rate per mile post is like rates are good, but it really all is about profit. And that's not at all what they're talking about. They're just talking about rates, and this guy's pounding their chest about how great they did, and you have these other guys that are wanting to, they hate themselves because they're not getting anywhere close to that, and it's just nonsense. So, and I want to let me just read the second post. Kenny Long actually posted. Let me read this. It's short and sweet. He says, a serious comment was just made in one of the discussions in the group. I think it's a very enlightening post, he says. And here's the quote. Here's the quote from this other gentleman. And it says this. The reason I'm broke, this guy actually posted this. The reason I'm broke is because I stick to my guns. I don't haul cheap freight. So I do a lot of sitting and a lot of deadheading. Can we let's hit pause, let's hit rewind. Let's read it again. The reason I'm broke is because I stick to my guns. I don't haul cheap freight, so I do a lot of sitting and deadheading. Man, like my first really, like those that know me, like I'm really sarcastic in a lot of ways. The first thing that comes to my mind is, man, your wife and kids must be so proud, right? They must be so proud that you're sticking to your guns when they don't have like toys or shoes or school clothes or food and that sort of stuff. Like that's the first thing that comes to my mind. Then you start thinking about it. And I made a comment, right? In my comment, I don't remember, it said sort of something to the effect of, like, being broke seems really bad, right? Especially when you know the reason that you're broke, right? It reminds me when I was young, when I had my first surgery. I've had over 100 full dislocations on my shoulders, sports-related kind of stuff. And I remember one of the first times I went in to see the surgeon, my shoulder had been dislocated the day before, night before, played a game, dislocated during the game, continued to play the game after I got it reset. And I could barely lift my hand up, right? The doctor was asking, and he literally, we've all heard this, right? The surgeon literally said, does it hurt really bad? And I was like, I mean, yeah, it's really sore. I can't really move it now. And he said, well, don't do that, right? Don't do that. We've all heard doctors say, if it hurts, don't do that. I'm gonna give another example. This was real. So backyard's sort of done, right? And plants were in like 2 or 3 weeks ago. Last week it was temps in the 115, 116 range for a couple of days. It's kind of been in that 107, 108 for the next several days. The plants all of a sudden really took a turn. And so brown tips on, and it doesn't really matter if it's the blue glows, the artichokes, the yuccas, the ficus trees, or the palm tree. It doesn't really matter. Like everything's turning brown and this and that. So I was getting a little worried because it was so hot. And I start Googling information. Now, understand, like, these are all plants that I don't really know anything about, right? All these are new to me. All these succulents and stuff, this is the first time I've ever had those. It's also the first time I've ever lived in a desert climate. So I jump online and I get really conflicting information. So I thought, you know what? I'm just gonna go talk to the guys at the greenhouse. So I went and talked to the guys at the greenhouse, and here's what they said, and I'm gonna tell you why this applies to trucking. Because this is how I can very easily put myself into the exact same shoes as a lot of owner-operators or a lot of lease operators. The GM at the greenhouse said this. He's like, well, tips are turning brown. Yes. Some of them turning kind of brown or shriveling up. The bottom leaves. Yes. Ficus trees kind of turning brown, curling up. Yes. And he says this. All right. Well, you are either 1, underwatering them, or 2, overwatering them. Well, so which is it? Right? He says, well, how long are you running it? Well, here's how my watering is set. He's like, well, man. So it just sort of led, like, one problem led to another problem. And literally, as I sit here 24 hours later, like, I still don't know what the answer is. But I went so far as to, like, I went outside yesterday, started digging up plants, right? Didn't really want to do that. Started digging up plants to see, is there too much water or not enough? But the problem is the exact same symptoms are like opposing ends of the spectrum. Too little water, too much water. And you don't want to do either, of course, right? It doesn't take a rocket science to figure that out. In this particular case, just this person says the reason, like, he knows it's either too much water or not enough. Like, he's already identified, this is the reason. The reason I'm going broke is because I stick to my guns. I don't haul cheap freight. I do a lot of sitting and I do a lot of deadheading. Yeah, a moisture sensor might work. I didn't think of that. Certify. I didn't install one. They do sell them. I did go on a mission yesterday for about 2 hours trying to find one. I couldn't find one. The other problem is there's a lot of rock in my backyard. All right, but we're moving away from the flowers. That was just the example. Guys, I promise, I can guarantee you, and there are very few times I ever guarantee anything on this channel about trucking, but I can guarantee you, if you know for a fact that you are going broke and you continue to do the same things that you're doing that you know is making you go broke, you will, like, one day end up broke. I can guarantee you that. Promise. The original post that sort of that preempted this post by Kenny was a gentleman had posted a kind of a screenshot of whatever load board he was using. There was 3 or 4 loads. He was coming somewhere out of around, I think, Pompano Beach, Florida, if I recall. And there was like one load that paid like $2,000. It was like almost 2,400 miles going to, it was either Washington or Arizona. There was a couple of loads in there. One was going to Washington, another one went to Arizona, another one went to Denver. The Washington, Arizona both paid around $2,000. The Denver, I think, paid $700. And you had all these guys like just losing their mind, not all, a lot of guys losing their mind about this $700 load. And a lot of guys actually paid attention to the details, and they said, hey, all these loads that you looked at are partials, right? They're partial loads. And the original poster was like, yeah, but this one load takes up 30 feet of my trailer. Any load that takes up, more than 50% of my trailer, that's a full load. Well, I mean, okay, I guess you can categorize it as that, or you could categorize it as this load took up 30 feet of your trailer, so you still have about 40% left in your trailer. You choose, right? You get to choose how you want to look at it. If you look at it as that's a full load, and you are contemplating taking $2,000 to go 2,400 miles, if you do that consistently, I think you'll go broke, right? Unless somehow you have a cost per mile that's insanely cheap. I'm going to say all kind of those things. We could go down this rabbit hole for a long time. The reason why I think business can be complicated is because you have a lot of different facets within this business that matters. For example, you need to understand what your costs are. One other quick example: the gentleman that came out, the guys that came out to do my backyard. So I ended up having them do a lot of stuff, and they're going to run my water lines, right? And this guy, right now, they've only been in business for about 8 months. Like, they've been working for years doing this, and they just started their own company about 8 months or so ago. And strong language barrier, except for one guy. He speaks a decent amount of English. And I asked him, I said, hey, what's it going to cost to run these water lines? And he said, I think it was $1.47. This is his answer, okay? And this guy, everybody wants to harp on, guys of other races that come here, immigrants, this and that. This guy knew that it cost him $1.47 a linear foot to run the PVC and all the attachments and all this sort of stuff, labor included. $1.47 a linear foot. That's how specific he was. I don't think you just randomly come up to $1.47. He clearly had spent enough time looking at all the purchases for all the materials, labor, and everything to determine over the past 8 months it takes $1.47 for him to earn that profit. So then I said, okay, that's fine. I would like to run 2 water lines, right? Because my entire backyard is solid granite. And so there's already been a lot of jackhammering, a lot of ditch witching and stuff done. And so they were going to come in, they were going to jackhammer, and they're going to lay some of this PVC in the same holes, right? So I said, how much if I want to run 2 PVCs? He said, well, why do you want to do that? Nobody's ever asked me to do that. And I said, I want to run 2 PVCs because if something bad ever happens, instead of me having to go and bring guys in and start jackhammering up rock all over again, we've already doing this once. We're doing all the hard work, all the hard labor, all the jackhammering now. Let's just go ahead and lay the extra, a couple hundred feet of PVC. Now's the time to do it. It's really cheap. But he didn't know what that cost was because nobody had ever asked him that. And I said, man, all the hard work's doing now. Let's just lay it in there now. So he goes back and he figures it up and he comes up with a number. And I don't remember what the number was. He just threw it out a dollar amount. And I said, okay, fine. But that gentleman knew the cost per foot. He's only been in business for 8 months. So many guys don't know what their cost per mile is. So you got to know your cost. The second piece of that is there's this component of cash flow. And then we get into the component of deadhead. Do I sit? Do I take the cheap freight or do I not? And that's where I think complexities begin to creep into, because it's not always just predicated on your cost per mile. Because if your cost per mile is, pick a number, $1.50, and you're offered a load out of Florida, for example, that's $1 a mile. Do you do that or do you not? Some guys say, no way, I just deadhead out of there. Okay, they're going to burn $1.50 a mile to go wherever, whether it's Georgia, Carolinas, wherever they want to go to get freight. So they're losing 100% of that cost. Some guys look at their cash flow and look at their business and their costs, and they say, well, man, I'm probably better off to just go and take a cheaper load. Maybe this load pays $1, so I'm only losing 50 cents a mile versus the guy that's deadheading losing $1.50 a mile. I made a comment on that post as well. I was like, there's a reason. There's a reason why the word deadhead has dead in it, right? It'll kill you. The argument that I made a long time ago when I sort of first started YouTube was, man, you got to be really cautious and you need to track your deadhead really specifically. I mean, I can jump onto our spreadsheet and I can take a peek at it. I can tell you every driver and what percentage that they are deadheading. Now, ultimately, that comes back to dispatch, right? What loads are they booking and how much deadhead are they throwing on the truck? And I hold dispatch accountable for that. I have a number that I've determined that is sort of within range, right, which is acceptable miles to deadhead for us. But for you or for others, man, it could be completely different. And that's where you need to understand that your cash flow matters, right? Running to go deadhead from South Florida up to Georgia, right now, this time of year, you're probably not going to get a particularly great rate, right? So if you're not going to get a particularly great rate, why lose $1,000 right there on that run? I think you can also sort of make the argument that timing plays a lot into this. Where are you at on your 70? Where are you at during the week? Like maybe if it's Friday, it might not make sense for you to deadhead because you're going to deadhead up. And are you going to find a load on Saturday? If you already found a load, okay, great, maybe. If not, it might behoove you just to go ahead and take that load for $1 a mile. You're going to have to sit Sunday and Monday anyways. Maybe you can squeeze in a reset while you're under that load. And you didn't lose $1.50 a mile. Maybe you only lost 50 cents a mile by taking that load. Now, granted, you're going to have to spend time on Monday morning getting empty, but that also gives you an opportunity Monday morning to start pounding the boards to try to find a really good rate going somewhere else, right? Out of Georgia or Carolina, wherever that short run is that you took out of South Florida. These are just like a couple of quick examples amongst a whole bunch of others that every truck or every carrier, every lease op or owner op needs to contemplate for their specific business. Another thing I guarantee you is you're not going to get the answer from my YouTube channel or anybody else's, nor are you going to get the answer from any Facebook page to tell you what to do. Because everybody's costs are different. Everything else is different. So that's why you need to understand your numbers and be really diligent about just being hyper-focused and have tunnel vision as it relates to your business and get super hyper-focused on what your costs are, what your cash flow are, or cash flow is, what's important to you, where do you sit on your clock? Like, there's just a million variables, right? If rates are really strong coming out of Georgia, then yeah, it very well may make sense for you to deadhead up to South Georgia if rates are 230, 240, 250 a mile. It might behoove you just to do that. If rates are strong out in the rest of the country or where you're going to go, then yeah, maybe you do lose $1.50 a mile to hurry up, take that load, you save that time and that mileage. But right now in July and August, when rates are pretty sketchy, you really need to have identified a really right lane, a correct lane, to make that decision to deadhead. 6 months ago, if you said, hey, do I deadhead? The answer is probably yes, because rates are so strong, out of Georgia, Carolinas, that sort of thing, where it made sense. This time of year, guess what? Everything changes. I mean, this business changes almost daily. Most certainly it can change weekly. Hey, SoCal, how are you? So you really have to understand your business, your cost, understand your cash flow, just all these different variables. You have to make that decision. But when you know that you're going broke because you're doing certain things, don't do those certain things anymore, right? Change that. This guy says, I'm sticking to my guns. I'm not going to haul cheap freight. Well, he doesn't define, or at least I didn't see where he defined what cheap freight was or is to him. I think it's different to everyone. But man, oh man, I would suggest, as anyone with any level of success in this industry, they would suggest to this individual to reduce deadhead and stop sitting. I mean, you've got to turn profitable revenue. Understand this as well. There sort of comes this point where the two lines sort of intersect and then bad things happen. Because our industry, there's typically not things like $8, $10 per mile freight for any noticeable miles, right? Most things tend to be in that whatever, $1.50 to $4 a mile range, right? And anywhere in between there. So it's not like you're gonna win the lottery for any one run. Now you might win a lot. You might actually find a $10 per mile run that maybe goes 2,000 miles or something, right? I don't know. But that's not enough profit to secure you for the entire year, right? So it's not like you're really winning the lottery on any one of these things. So you really just need to start assessing all these different variables for your business, and use caution when you go to internet forums or YouTube or anywhere else to try to determine that, because that's what you need to be determining. Now, can you get a level of education on some of these sites or whatever about all the things that you should be tracking, yeah, you can probably get that. Again, at a super high level, but then it's up to you to go and dig down and determine what all these numbers are so that you can run your business and not go broke by sitting and deadheading. That was crazy. I mean, it was literally crazy to me. Deadhead, you're right, trucker, hypocrite buster. Deadhead is about as cheap as it gets, right? Not only is it no revenue, right? But it's 100% cost. So again, if your cost per mile is to run your trucking mile is $1.50. Now, granted, you're going to be empty, so you should have about a 17% savings on your fuel cost, right? Whatever your fuel burn is, if you're running empty. So take your whatever it is, right? $1.57 a mile if that's your cost, and you're going to say, okay, well, I'm going to save, whatever it is. Take your 17% of your fuel burn. But still, you're going to be, if your cost is $1.50, you're still going to be somewhere in the $1.20 or whatever to run empty. So it's again, you're not only you're not making money, you're losing revenue, or excuse me, you're spending money. It was nuts, man. Britt, Florida, how are you? Pro Liquor, how are you? Tib, Superfi, Arturo. Let's see, freight rates have been relatively good. Why would anybody sitting? Also, if you're making the sacrifice of leaving home, why go sit in a truck stop and stay home? Look, I don't know what the individual's home life is or isn't, but I agree, right? You can move yourself to parts of the country that do have good freight rates. Maybe not what they have been in the past 6 months, but my goodness, right? You can go and find good rates. And again, if you find that lane, then you have to determine, how do I get to that lane, right? Do I deadhead or do I take something cheaper up there? Sugar Shine, Greg Inman, why would you continue to participate in a failing business plan, especially when you know the root cause? Greg, I don't know. I don't know. This was one, and that's why Kenny posted as well. I think Kenny followed that comment up with something to the effect of, what are people's opinion of this mindset? Because he knew, I mean, again, Kenny posted that post knowing the answer was ludicrous, right? Don't do that. Trick Hypocrite Buster, how are you? Larry June, how are you? Let's see. Yeah, let's. Hypocrite Buster says he's getting rich, not broke. I think most guys over the past year and a few months have been doing really well. But again, it requires you to get in the truck, shut the left door, and start shifting gears, right? You got to make some miles to make money in this business. And for those that want to get really particular, I mean, you can take short loads, don't get me wrong, and make good money. And for that owner-operator, again, that's sort of that next piece of that puzzle is, you want to sort of mitigate miles, but try to capture the shortest, most well-paying runs. But at some point, you got to make sure that you're bringing enough in to pay the bills, right, and have profit. So it would have been if this individual, if he would change his mindset of, I'm going to stick to my guns, like what the guy should stick to his guns about. If you're gonna choose, of all the things to choose from in this business, choose to stick to your guns to being profitable. Choose that, and it's a hell of a lot harder to go broke, right? It's a hell of a lot harder to go broke if you're focused on sticking to your guns on turning profit versus sitting or whatever. It's kind of mind-blowing stuff. Time is money. Losing a day of revenue is a killer to the bottom line. Losing a couple days of revenue in the month is disastrous. That's that piece I was just talking about, right? You have to look at the time, you've got to look at miles, you got to look at the revenue that you're generating and whether or not it's profitable. And then there's a balance, right? There is no right one single answer of, it changes every week, right? So sometimes you're going to find runs that are a little bit longer for you. Sometimes you're going to find, shorter runs that pay a lot better. Again, I've given this example a couple times. I've even got a video about it, like is a $4 per mile run good? And I was talking to a guy at a truck stop, and I forget the details now. I think it was he was getting like I don't know. I don't remember the exact details on that conversation anymore. But let's just say it's 100 miles, and he was flatbedding, so he had to tarp it, obviously, and do all the work on the front end and the back end, get loaded. He was familiar with that shipper, said it took him a couple hours to do the work. It was 100 miles, I think it was, or maybe, no, it was way shorter than that. But it was like $150 he was gonna make to take that run. Why take that run? Oh, it's $4 a mile. Okay, it just doesn't make sense, right? If you're gonna spend 8 hours of your day, granted you're not burning a lot of diesel, but if you're gonna spend 8 hours, surely you can make a whole lot more than just $140 or whatever it was that he was making that day. Something like that. Travis says, met one of your drivers in Oklahoma City. That must have been Alice. Archie says, you need to know your cost per mile before even thinking of getting into your own truck. Without that, you'll go broke in your opinion. That's sort of my opinion too, Archie. You're preaching to the choir there on a Sunday morning. Prolica says, I live in Florida, never haul crap like that. Why would you tie up your truck for under $1 a mile? And again, that's sort of the thing, right? That's the conversation, is there are times when it makes sense to do that. There are times when it doesn't. I also think that, I mean, for you in your case, right, if you live there, and that was some of the other, I saw another question somebody was asking, or a couple of people were asking, man, I wish I knew somebody that lived in Florida that could speak to this. Do they just deadhead out or whatever? Again, let's assume for a minute, right, that they all talk to you, like you were the person, you live in Florida, maybe you run dry van as well or whatever. The mistake that they're gonna make is your business could look completely different than their business, right? What are their costs, right? What are their weekly costs, their monthly costs, fixed costs, variable costs? So that to me is the wrong mindset. I think it's good to get advice, but again, my thought is they're probably just gonna say something like, well, what do you do? And you're gonna say, oh, I deadhead out. And they're gonna be like, okay, well, that's what I should do. Maybe not at all. Alice, I just saw your comment there somewhere. Good morning. Harding says, spray some Arizona on your plants. Oh, wait, not Arizona. Atrazine. Takes about a year, mistakes to realize you're going broke. Well, I think, I used to sort of agree with that. I think with fuel at 320 something a gallon, I think you can go broke a whole lot sooner. Now, in this guy's case, doesn't sound like fuel is a particularly big concern to him because he's sitting. It sounds like a lot. So you just shouldn't be going broke right now. And if you're going broke right now, man, you might as well sell that truck because now's a really good time to sell trucks. You might as well sell that truck because I assure you, if you're going broke now, you're not going to make it if freight ever goes back down to the $80s and stuff like that. Like, just give it up. Red Dane says, spoke to a broker. They're using the tactic of rescheduling loads that a few they can get a lower rate. Nothing, most carriers will drop off the load. Yeah, so we had that happen to us 2 or so weeks ago. Here's the quick example. We've seen this happen a number of times. Not a boatload, but it's something you guys should be considered of. So this load, I don't know, I think it picked up like on a Thursday and it delivered on a Saturday morning. And driver gets there Saturday morning, right? He's ready to unload. Gets there and somebody's coming out as he's pulling in. They were like, not only do we not accept trucks on the weekend, like we're not even open on the weekend. Furthermore, we've never been open on the weekend, right? So if that's the case, I mean, like I told the broker, I said, look, either the person that schedules this load doesn't know the customer, and they said they've been working with this customer for a while. All right, so that would imply that you do know the customer. Or two, on the other end of the spectrum, you lied to us, knowing full well that if you posted this load that was a 1.5-day run time frame that's actually going to deliver on Monday, an extra 2 days, it's going to cost you at least another couple $1,000s. And what your hope is that you're just going to pay $250 of layover, and you guys are going to pocket the extra $1,500, right? Oh, by the way, that's exactly what happened. And I called the broker and I was like, I told Wilbur the morning that he called me on Saturday morning that this load was supposed to deliver. I was like, well, here's what's going to happen. They're going to try to pay us $250 and think that we'll be okay with it. So one of the things you can do is call that receiver as soon as you get that load, as soon as you get the information. Call. I mean, what do most guys do? They call the receiver or the shipper just to make sure they can get in or whatever, or this and that. How many people are actually taking the extra 30 seconds or 3 or 4 minutes to call the receiver and say, hey, are you actually open on Saturday? We didn't. Not only did it cost us for the truck to have to sit, we lost what we kind of deemed as a high value load, a load that was paying really well, probably a better way to put it, because our truck was loaded with whatever crap was supposed to be off Saturday that wasn't. Diesel mechanics make good money. So says SSMTB. Samuel Joe, what's up? How are you? He's talking to SoCal. Trucker Rick, I want to get a truck. I was thinking having 20,000 saved for repair is a good idea. Absolutely, Trucker Rick, go make an offer to buy that guy's truck. He's going broke. You can probably get a steal on it. I can help you out right there. Hey, Yukon, how are you? I'd like to see this guy go to Denver and stick to his guns. There's a look, sticking to your, like I said, man, sticking to your guns on pick profit if you want to stick to something. Trucker, I might melt going to Phoenix. It's not, I don't know why, I don't know what it's supposed to be next week. Last week was a little rough. It was a little toasty last week. Let me jump down here. Let's see, Vlad Raptor 5. I watched your last live feed yesterday. So I'm assuming you watched it as recorded. Brent, Florida, wrenches. Can anyone take care of the hat post above? I didn't see it. Vlad Raptor, please shout me out, I'm going broke. Not me. I'm not going. What is that? One spring, two spring, or SPRG? SRPG? Not me. This was another driver that was posting on a forum that he was going broke. And he was talking about the fact that he was going broke, and he knew why he was going broke because he was sitting. Only the lonely. Think about setting up your next shot before. Yeah, right. No doubt. It's mind blowing stuff. Joy Wild. Find a cold storage that's open, drop it there. You're right. Chrome and lights, they do look great. They look awesome. And they don't make you money. They do cost you money. Charlie, how are you? All right, Tib, you're gonna get my blood pressure up. Let's see, figure out your expenses for the month, personal and business. Take 20 days per month, average that. I'll tell you what you need to break even. Okay? Now you're assuming that you're going to run 20 days a week. When you start tracking those guys that think like that, it's really dangerous, man. Because when you start thinking in revenue per day, it's really easy to handle that on a week, right? Okay, hey, I'm going to drive 4 days this week. But what constitutes driving a day? What happens if you get a long load or it takes somebody forever to load you, and you only drove 100 miles? That day, right? Did you qualify that as a day of driving? You only got 100 miles in, and you wasted a whole day. You burn a whole day by getting loaded. It's just a really dangerous thing. And what makes that worse is when you add time to that, meaning when you do that for 6 months and you say, I want to try to drive 20 miles a day, it just gets really sketchy, and it's really, really easy to lose sight of your revenue and your profitability. You're far better off looking and understanding your cost per mile, because that assumes all of your fixed costs as well as your variable costs. It is a predictive number. It's based on some averages, but that's far better because you're not going to lose sight of an entire day, right? You're not going to lose inside of entire weeks when you do this for a year, right? Because of a long load or a breakdown or this or that. So Cost per mile, in my opinion, is far, far better off to run that versus that revenue per day. Tracy Baker says, as you've stated on here before, freight brokers been on freight pretty much a yearly basis, hitting it, coinciding that they are in the middle of the year. Have been able to up all the rates. So, I mean, most of these guys do bid on yearly contracts. And some of that stuff, like I said, they get put in a bind. Some of these guys don't. Some of these guys have terms with their customers that they, they can move stuff on the spot market, change loads. So it varies. It's pretty rare when your broker's going to tell you that, right? Why would they? They're sort of giving you a hint as to their profitability, and that's probably not what they want to do. But man, I'm just telling you, if you know why you're going broke, and you're doing it because of ego, sticking to your guns because you refuse to take what's cheap freight, that's crazy. I'll say this too really quickly about this this one of the loads that he had posted. A lot of guys are banging on this company. Companies shouldn't be allowed to post rates like that. $700 to go 2,000 miles or whatever it was. That's ridiculous. Shame on them, right? That load, that $700 they were trying to ship, took up 5 feet. 5 feet on the truck. So what a lot of guys failed to understand was they failed to take more than just 10 seconds to actually look at those loads and realize that they were partials. If you do some quick math, if you say 5 foot of the truck is roughly 10%, I think it comes out to like, and you assume that that's $700, or if you assume you get $800, I think it came out to be like $3.33 per mile for a fully loaded trailer to go to take that run. So I don't know that company really was off the mark all that much, right? I mean, just some pretty simple math to say, well, if this were a full load, what's it going to pay, right? It's paying well above average. So, I don't know. I mean, one of those loads, I think, went from somewhere South Florida to Washington. Paid $2,000, basically like 90 cents a mile. Depending on when that needs to get there, again, most parcels, they're not like uber time sensitive. Spend 30 minutes looking on load boards, finding other partial runs going that direction. That load could have turned out to be really sexy, right? The guy was almost getting $1 a mile just on the base load. I don't know. Tib, take care. Trucker 202, at what point do you stop analyzing your cost per mile and offer a daily rate? I do it at about 400 miles. I have a daily rate, anything less. So I think you can sort of determine that pretty easy, right? So let's say that your cost per mile, just pick an easy number, pick a buck, pick $1. If you average running, I mean, what can you average running for a day? 600 miles? Okay, well then your daily rate's probably $600, right? Is that maybe the best way to look at that? No, because you've got your cost in there, right? You got cost in there, but you also have, and you should have your salary in that number. Again, you probably don't at $1 a mile, but just for purposes of the argument, you would. So you are making some money. Probably more realistically is somewhere in that $1.50 a mile minimum today with fuel. So you're probably are looking somewhere around that $1,000 a day, right, as a day rate. Maybe you give them a little bit of a discount if that's what you choose to do, because it's only a 100-mile run or a 200-mile run, right? So you're gonna be burning a lot less fuel, putting a lot less miles on your truck. And if that company is looking for someone to take this load or these types of loads consistently, sure, that's not a bad way to look at it. But again, if you're doing something like that, then yeah, you can begin to look at costs a little bit differently if you are always taking really short runs, right? If you're not always taking really short runs, that's where things can get out of hand a little bit. But if you're going to be in that 80,000 mile plus a year, 70,000 mile plus a year, right? Cost per mile is probably a decent way to go. Michael says, Scott, again, the lack of critical thinking from drivers produces short-sighted visions. I mean, look here, I don't know. Well, I think you can say that for some percentage, but in this case, like this individual seemed to have thought through this, right? I mean, he knew what was causing the negative result. I mean, the unfortunate thing is that a lot of guys don't know what's causing the negative result. And so I at least applaud this guy for knowing, right? You sort of want to like baby shake him though, right? You want to like shake the baby and be like, hey, don't do that, right? Don't sit, don't deadhead. But it's for those guys that don't analyze any costs, or they just think like really big picture of just revenue per day or that sort of stuff. And they are running 100,000 miles and they're constantly spending time on, rate per mile bullshitters, looking at, how bad they're doing, right? You got all these guys, oh, I'm making $6 a mile. I went from freaking Seattle to Puerto Rico getting $6 a mile. How'd you do today, right? It's just, it's like, and I feel bad for those guys because they don't have, if you don't know what your costs are, you don't know what your revenue is, you don't know what your profit is, you just don't know what the problem is. It's sort of like me yesterday with am I underwatering or overwatering? I don't know, right? What's wrong, Grace? And so it's like complete and utter frustration, right? I don't know, it's several $1,000s and stupid green plants back there. I don't want them to die because I'm overwatering or underwatering. Again, don't know anything about these plants, don't know anything about this climate, so on and so forth, right? So I get the frustration of when you don't know, and that sucks, right? Even more frustrating is I went to the expert and they told me the same thing I already knew. I still didn't have the answer. If you're gonna run a business, treat it like a stinking business. Guys are so quick to make fun of immigrants or whatever. Yet this guy walks into my house, says, man, it's $1.47. Like he knows it to the penny what he's gonna charge to run PVC for water lines, right? And all the drip systems and so on and so forth. He knows it to the penny. And how many guys know what their cost per mile is to run their truck? I don't know. I think a lot fewer guys actually really do. I would also tell you that here's the number. Here's what I would love to see. Like if somebody God, what's the guy? Who's the guy that has the Sirius XM radio? His name is escaping me. Talks about cost per mile. He had his own truck design. Come on, somebody help me out. What's his name? Whatever his name is. Like I would love to take a poll. Rutherford, yeah. Yeah, I think that's right. I would love to like take a poll. Like if he's got whatever, 1,000 listeners, like if you could get real honest feedback, I think it would be so interesting to take an unbiased poll of how many individuals that listen to him or pay to some seminar or whatever. Here's the fascinating data I would love to see. How many of you, of these 1,000 people, track your cost per mile? Honestly, you do or you don't, yes or no? Okay, what is your cost per mile, right? Let's see what it is, right? And I'm also assuming that when I say they track their cost per mile, that they're doing it correctly. It's gonna be hard to figure out. But just for grins and giggles, here's where I'm going. How many people track their cost per mile? What is it? And then of those individuals that do track it, compare the profitability of those that do track it versus the profitability of those that don't track it. And I bet it would be astounding. Like I really do. Because if you're running any business, especially trucking, and you don't know what your costs are, you're just playing the lottery. Except there is no get rich quick scheme in trucking. So it's not like you're gonna win it big if you ever do hit it, right? Yeah, Kevin Rutherford, thank you. I don't know why his name escaped me there. Now here's another problem. Like, and I know this. Like for guys that watch this channel, for guys that talk to or listen to Kenny Long or Kevin Rutherford or whoever else, or SoCal, whoever else may be out there, right? I would tend to tell you that those individuals that are subscribed to those channels probably do so because they're trying to improve that, because they sort of fall into that camp of, maybe I'm not doing it great, but I need to do it better, and I'm going to go to these resources to try to identify how do I do that, right? And so and some are probably here just for the entertainment or that sort of thing. But I think by and large, those individuals that are watching a couple of those types of channels consistently are doing it for a purpose, for a reason, right? Let's see. I hauled a load out of Miami. 3 picks, 1 drop to Orlando, straight through $800. Okay. Delivered to a trucking company that operated that exact same business model of piecing together partials. And look, right? Hey, that's not I don't know what the mileage is because we don't run down there a lot. I don't even know what, off the top of my head. I don't even know what Miami to Orlando is. But if you get something going back that's reasonable, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. At Brent, let's see. I can arrange the tub/barge to get your truck to Puerto Rico. Red Eye, the other question is, are they adding their household expenses with their cost per mile as well? Some do, some don't, right? And man, that's not a part of your business, guys. It's not. Your mortgage or your car payment, that's not part of your business, right? So don't add that in there. You want to add a salary for yourself, right? You want to add a salary. But if you're adding in your cost, I had a guy one time send me a spreadsheet and it had a lot of those costs in there. I think his cost per mile was like, I don't remember now, it was like $2.30 a mile. I told him, you're not going to make any money. You'll be out of business really quick. And let me rephrase, you'll be out of business. Depending on how much money you have in the bank or access to debt, credit cards, things of that nature, you're not going to be in business a long time if your cost per mile is $2.30. It's not. It's just not real. So you either got to get a much cheaper truck, cheaper trailer, like you got to cut some expenses, like you got to start cutting somewhere. There's a lot of fat on there. And if there's not a lot of fat in your mind, then you got to revisit some things because you're in bad shape, right? But that's a good point, Red Eye. Thank you. Trucking with Authority. Let's see. Those that don't track it are always more. Man, there's a quote of the day. That's so true. That is so true. Those that don't track it are always more profitable. Just ask them if you don't believe them. And God, that's so true. I mean, that is so true. I don't know when you jumped in, Kenny, but I was just making a comment. I said, wouldn't it be really interesting to know, like if there was some seminar or whatever, those that listen to you or me or Rutherford or SoCal or whoever, if they knew their exact cost per mile and you compare that to those that don't, who's more profitable, right, at the end of the year, if you start looking at W-2s and things of that nature. Man. Josh, how are you? Outlaw 76. You know what's funny? Most trucking YouTubers had no idea what cost per mile was until you popped on YouTube. I don't know if that's true or not, Outlaw, but I do hope that a lot more, if that's true, great. That's really one of the purposes behind the channel is I just want guys to be more successful, right? I had one of my drivers, we were having breakfast here a couple weeks back, and he was like, why do you, what's the whole point of the Trucking Exec channel? Why do you do this? Why do you take the time, whatever? And for me, it really is, I mean, it goes way back to when I was a kid. My dad was always gone. And that's the ugliest part of trucking. And now that I'm a parent, maybe the ugliest part is being away from, if I had to be away from Kyle all the time, that might be the uglier part. But in either scenario, whichever side of that fence you're on, they both suck. I think we can all agree with that. And so if that's the case, if they both suck, man, then let's go be as profitable as we can. Let's make as much money as we can so that when we do take some vacation, we can actually go and enjoy those times with our family. That's really what it's about. I just think too many people work too hard, like my dad, spent too many years in this industry trying to make it something really good to have. And look, I'll just say this. I genuinely feel that a lot of companies, I believe that their MO is to take advantage of a lot of drivers. And there's a lot of drivers that, don't have the experience or the education. I'm not banging on them at all. I just mean, that's just the reality of the situation. And so if the whole point is just to try to help protect from those guys being taken advantage of. I don't know. Not to get all up in my feelings. Had my fuel stolen in Texas last week. Man, it happened to us a couple weeks ago. We were up in 240 miles, says Allie. All right, so what was that? A little less than, somewhere in that 320 a mile or something like that. SoCal, you know this to be as true as I am. Numbers do lie. You can manipulate numbers to have them tell the story that you want. The art, I commented this in one of my live feeds the other day where I think it was the video where I said, hope is not a business plan. I think true leaders do a couple things really well. And one of those things is they have the ability just to look at the cold, hard facts as they are, not twist them, not manipulate them, all that sort of stuff, and look at what's real. And the danger is those underneath you tend to look at you and go, God, this guy's so pessimistic, right? He's negative. That's all he's just looking at. And there is a little bit of truth to that, no doubt. But you have to be willing to look at the real hard numbers. It's like golf. I can't tell you how many times for those of you that golf, you can appreciate this quick story. You can learn a lot about someone when you spend 4 hours playing golf with them. And I'll tell you right now, I've played golf with many executives across the country they kept their score absolutely 100% correct. And I played with many that lied their ass off, right? Like, you get in the cart, put me down for a 6. You had a 16, right? Tells you a lot about an individual. And same thing with trucking, right? Just keep your numbers, keep them accurate. If you suck at the end of the year, and we all do at some point, we all suck at some things. If you don't know where you suck, you can't work to fix it. It's like this gentleman. That's the thing that frustrates me so much is the guy knows where he sucks. He knows why he sucks, and he's not doing anything about it. It's like, again, baby shake him. Trucker Assassin, you have to trim the fat. You do, man. You do. I mean, well, you don't have to, but you should, right? You really should. Dickie's barbecue is horrible in Michigan and New Jersey. You know, I'll tell you what, Dave, it was horrible in Denver as well. This one down here it's not bad. But honestly, I go there because they have fried okra, if you want to know the truth. That's why Kyle and I go there. Would you say, SoCal, there is money for everyone. Absolutely. You bet, man. You're right. I'm just jumping away up. Pigtails in here. Heyman, how's it going? When did SoCal learn to interact in lowercase? He does use caps a lot, doesn't he? That's funny. When did all the lanes become yours? What are you talking about, Assassin? Trace Baker says, every trucker that wants to have their own business should take a business course before they take the first step. You know what? There was a couple, doing some of the editing, I had sort of two choices, right? I could just do it the hard way, figure it out on my own. And in editing, like with the cameras and YouTube and stuff, there's a million YouTube videos out there that are really good that will help you out. I mean, literally, it's like step by step. Or I could just go to some small little junior college, right? Or something like that and figure it out. I ended up doing it on my own. It's just easier because there was a lot of quality information was there. I just don't think in trucking you're going to get a lot of that really quality information. Again, because this is far too detailed. I think it's far too detailed, so I think it's difficult. But yeah, man, I mean, you can absolutely go and get some basic education. There's a ton of places that are out there that you can do Outlaw says, what I'm saying is I hear a lot of people say that the old time way does not work, but cost per mile is a part of the old way. Well, again, I think there are times when cost per mile does not best fit the situation, right? I'm not saying that cost per mile is the end all be all. If you run really short runs, right, really short lanes, like the what was the guy in Florida? If you're just like constantly running local stuff, probably not the best way to look at it, right? I would go ahead and track it. I would always track it. I would rather have more data than less, always, right? But if you're going to be running short, if you're going to be running really short, then it might not be the most applicable way. But again, I don't know what that number is, Outlaw, because I haven't tracked it because we don't do short. But I don't know what number, like end of year total mileage. I don't know what number I would suggest would indicate that maybe cost per mile is not that number. I don't know what that is. I can probably really safely say anything over that 70,000 mile and up, cost per mile is probably the way that you want to go. Cost per day is handy. Cost per day is really easy. I think that's why a lot of guys do it, is because it's really easy. I know all my fixed costs. I'm going to take my variable costs. I'm going to divide by 365. Really easy. The problem is, I think if you started out on December 31st, right, and you're sitting at a table with a guy and you say, okay, tomorrow's the 1st, and how many days this week this year are you going to run? They're going to say, whatever, 240 days this year I'm going to run. I think when you get to January 1st of the following year and they say, how many days did I run? I think they missed their mark significantly. I just think it's a really poor way. And if you miss that mark noticeably, your numbers are all screwed up. And so then you have no idea what your profitability is until you do your taxes. Like that's just like when you talk that out, like when you talk that out, that's a really poor way. I mean, I just think that's a really poor way to run that business. Now, if you've got something that's dedicated, you're running short haul and that sort of stuff, and you know what you're going to have some consistent revenue, that's different. I think that's different. I think that's a very different argument that I could absolutely side with that person. But if you don't have something that's dedicated, that's known revenue coming in, it's a really sketchy way to run your business. That's just my opinion. Yeah, there's a lot of ways to make that money. You're right, SoCal. Trucker Assassin, you can block me. And you guys going at each other? Josh Brothers, how are you, man? Robert Kroom, good morning. When will you do the detention? Oh man, I've got it. Let me make the list here. I'll try to do that sometime the next couple of days. Sorry about that, Mr. Kroom. Diego, welcome. How are you? Yeah, cost per day, cost per mile. I see what you're saying there, Dave. Let's see. If you can't trim the fat, blame me. I live really, really frugal, and I do it for a reason. Again, anytime you've had money, you lose it. Whether that's our parents, my parents are the same way, right? I mean, they grew up when times were really, really tough. So I just have never grown up to be frivolous with money. Having said that, being frivolous with money, that's a really easy thing to learn. Trust me, I know. I spent a lot of money. God, I wasted so much money just on stupid stuff. And then when the market crashed, I realized how little I knew about managing money. I special ordered a BMW one time. They built it in Germany and they shipped it over. They were backing it off the truck. And you know how they ship them, right? They're all enclosed. And so I'm all excited. Guy calls me, hey, truck's gonna be here at whatever, 9 a.m., 8:45 I was there. They don't even get that car halfway where I can see it. And I said, I hate that color. And the guy was like, ha ha ha, that's funny. He's hitting me on the shoulder. That's funny. I was like, no, I hate that color. And this car was right out of six-figure car. And I was like, I don't want that car. And so when he realized I was serious, he was like, well, what color do you want? So I picked a different color. They built another car and they shipped it over. And yeah, that cost me a lot of money. Just because I didn't really hate it. I just didn't like it. I could go on for days about all the ways I've wasted money. Don't waste money, it's bad. Scott, gonna check on a place in Mesa if they're still open. Solid barbecue. What's that? Barbecues? That's not bad. That place is pretty good. I don't know if that's where. That's not Mesa though. Look, I'll drive Gilbert Rock. That's far, but barbecue. I'll drive far for good barbecue. Let me know what it is. Trucker Assassin, I never threaten you, making stuff up again. You guys play well with each other. Walt Smith, if you set a goal for 240 days a year to make your profit for the year, you have a truck breakdown for 2 to 3 months, then you're broke. And that's sort of my point, right? Is when you're tracking cost per mile, if you're broke down for whatever, an extended period of time, the moment that you start putting numbers into your spreadsheet, really, really quickly, those numbers are going to inflate quickly, right? It's going to catch up to you really quickly. Whereas, and that's the whole point, right? Is nothing is like real time. Nothing is to the minute, updated, perfect, because cost per mile is based on the numbers that you're running on the average. But far quicker than any other method that I'm aware of, it will catch up to give you the most real-term number the fastest. And that's what we want. We want the most accurate data to be able to make the most accurate decisions all the time. And that's how we win more often than not. Sugar Shine, true story. Sugar Shine, I'm pretty strong on the truth. So Columbia Dave, here's my point, and you're right. Just so everybody knows, Columbia Glider Dave says if you plan to run 240 days, and you don't, that still leaves you 120 days to run. Absolutely right. And I don't even know if 240 is remotely close to being right? And maybe it is or maybe it isn't. Don't know. I just picked a random number out of the air. But here's the problem. What is running a day? And here's why I'm saying that is because I think that you also run that mindset, right? That cost per day mindset, right? Now, again, I think that, I suspect, because I think you work for Kenny, and so you're probably far ahead on the scale of understanding your numbers than most. But even that being said, if you're running cost per day, you run both. Okay, well, that's good. So if you run cost per day, you also, I believe that what most people that I speak to say, cost per day means I need to make some number per day, right? The number I hear more often than not is $1,000 a day. So if you're gonna run some number of days per week, right, or per year, and you only drove 100 miles that day, right, you didn't make $1,000. Now you might have made $1,000 on that run, right? Let's say that you're gonna pick Monday morning at 0600 and you're gonna take a 600-mile run, or whatever it is that drops the next day, okay? You're gonna get paid $1,000 for that. If you took a really long load and you didn't get out there until late that evening, and you drive all night, and you still make your delivery on time, good, congrats, right? You busted your butt. You drove that day, you made $1,000, but now guess what? Now you've got to take your 10 during all day Tuesday. You're probably not going to be getting loaded. You might get loaded Tuesday night, but if you don't, now you're getting loaded again Wednesday. Wednesday, you got to start calling, you got to find another load, whatever. You might not get loaded until Wednesday afternoon. That's my point, right? And that's just like one example, and there's a bazillion others. That's my point is when you start tracking per day, it gets really blurry, and you can say, but hey, I ran Monday, right? I ran 100 miles on Monday. So I just think it gets really blurry really quick. Let me ask this question, and I don't know how many, so let's ask a couple questions, Dave. How many miles do you drive on average per year? So Red Dane, that's what I was kind of saying. You can kind of run your cost per day kind of on 123,000. Okay. So that's pretty heavy for a lease op, owner op. A lot of guys try to be around that 100. So that's pretty heavy. That's good. So which one do you find to be far more, so when you compare when you look at your taxes, right, Dave, let's say that you made whatever your take home is, right? Which one is more accurate? Cost per mile, since you run both, because I think that's cool. I've never met anybody that actually runs both or runs both. That's cool. So when you look at your cost per day versus your cost per mile at the end of the year, and then you run your taxes with what you took home, or you're just looking at gross and net revenues, which one's more accurate? Your cost per mile should be far more accurate, especially if you're running 123,000 miles. Anyone have any luck with freight waves? So I've seen some of their videos and some of their stuff. By luck, I'm not sure what you mean. Food Mooch is in the house, welcome. Has anybody seen my socks? Hypocrite Buster, just be like me, we just wear flip-flops. 10K per month on a 10-month year. Percentage of revenue follower by rate per mile. Are they accurate for some of their data? Is that what you're asking, Joshua? Like a lot of the sonar stuff? Is that what you're asking? If that's what you're asking, I tend to follow them pretty religiously, and in their data, again, here's the thing to understand, right? A lot of their data is reactive, so they kind of tell you what's happened. Their predictive stuff, I think, is moderately accurate, right? They sort of say, looking forward this next week or two, here's sort of what should be happening. Yeah, I do think that they have a pretty good pulse on the industry and a pretty solid understanding. So yeah, I've not seen anything that makes me question. I've not seen any of their stuff that I say just looks way off base. Cost per day I use when I switch to short haul or loads requiring layover for pricing. Okay, so now let's ask this question, Dave. So how do you determine your cost per day? Is it predicated on, do you do sort of what I suggested, or do you do something different? What I suggested earlier was take your cost per mile and sort of maximize what the most number of miles that you can run in a day. Again, whatever that number is, say it's $1,000. Is that what you charge for a short run, or how are you arriving your cost per day number? Is it just predicated on fixed cost, variable cost, and divide that by the number of days you're going to run a year? Hello from India. Satellite Jack, I think the question should be, which one has a greater variance? Well, that's sort of what we're getting at, right? Satellite Jack is, when you look at the numbers at the end of the year, which one's more accurate, right? That's exactly what we're looking at. And I can tell you, again, unless somebody's tracking cost per day in a manner that I've not tracked before, cost per mile seems to be far more, significantly more accurate. So cool. Hey, long video. Longer than I want to. Man, if you are so look, a couple lessons from this gentleman. Learn the lesson. Understand what your costs are, track them. When you identify what bad things are going on, don't continue to do those bad things. Get your hands around what's going on. Understand this business, because there are a lot of facets to running a business really well. There are reasons why I and others in this space say you never stop learning, right? And then that's just from the business side of things, right? That's just from this side. I know that you guys never stop learning. For those of you guys that are lease op or owner ops, you never stop learning on the business side. I guarantee you never stop learning, from your side of the steering wheel either. And so put a lot of these pieces into play and determine what's going to work best for me, right? Maybe a good way to go is, although I would find it confusing, maybe track both. Run your own numbers. Tracking with authorities. Cost per mile is the only accurate number at the end of the year, but cost per day is important when quoting a price to count for time involved. Yeah, I don't disagree with that. But my question is, agreed, but here's my question. How are you determining, so this is a question for you, Kenny, or for you, Dave. How are you determining your price? That's right, we're talking price, not cost. How do you determine your price per day when you are using a cost per day or a cost per mile model? Right? Cost per mile, you should have all of your costs figured in. You should have a salary figured in as well. And you know what your break even is. So if you take that run, you're covering all your costs as well as your salary for the end of the year. Anything above that's just gravy, right? That's just more profit. Good for you. So when you guys are going to take a 200-mile run, right? You know that, hey, this is going to take this amount of time, right? If a 200-mile run is going to take you a full day, oftentimes they do, right? Do you say, hey, my cost per mile is, I can run 600 miles at whatever my cost is, and that's sort of your number? And then you add some to it, or how do you guys come up with that? That's what I'm curious about. Because when guys say cost per day, at least the large majority of the ones that I talk about, they're not using cost per mile and then deriving a time, i.e., yeah, you have to use, all right, so that's what you're saying, you use both. Profit expected annually divided by 336 days plus fixed cost by 336 plus miles. Let me read that again. Profit expected. All right, I see what you're saying. Well, I guess I'd want to think on that for a few minutes. Because if you're using that model, you would ultimately end up with a lower. You would end up with a lower price. You would end up with a noticeably lower price than you would if you took cost per mile. So if we're talking about, yeah, you would. So if we're talking about how you price a load that's a short haul, right? Again, something. So if your maximum number of miles you can drive in a day is 600, if you're going to price something as 200 miles, again, you're not going to price it with cost per mile. Again, if your cost per day or cost per mile, is $1, you're not going to charge $200, right? You would never do that. You're going to say, hey, this is going to cost me an entire day. I typically run 600 miles in a day. If my cost per mile is $1 per mile, I charge $600. So, maybe you charge $600, right? Or more. Michael, there aren't any particular books relative to trucking specific that I have read I've only read one or two, and I don't remember who wrote them because I didn't think they were particularly any good. So no, I can't think of any specific for trucking. Yes. Oh no, I have no doubt, Dave. Your variable is less, right? No doubt. But you're still So then you're more profitable, right? You're more profitable. So if you take your cost per mile, so again, you take your cost per mile at $1, for 600 miles. So yes, your variable is going to be less, but all that means is more profit. And I don't think, and I guess my experience, so let me ask this, Dave, whether it's 100 miles or 400 miles, are you really pricing it any different? Again, pricing. Do you really price a 100-mile run any different than you do a 400-mile run? I don't. Again, because I'm applying that component of time. I'm assuming it's all one-day run. Anything less than 600 miles is sort of an all-day run. Your cost on 200 miles is less than, yeah, no doubt. Absolutely agree. but I'm talking price. Missed opportunity is not the same as cost. I would agree with that, but where's the missed opportunity? That's my exact. You're making my point. I think there, right, Dave? Is if you're gonna take if you can run 700 miles a day and you get a 2,800 mile load, right? That's a 4-day run. Right? If that's what you can squeeze it in, and now your delivery time is going to matter. So I don't know how you could do it in 3 days. Well, I guess you could have on that last day, depending on how you look at it. But if you're calling that last day, if you're talking early load and early unload. But take that same example, right? 2,800 miles, whether it's a 3-day run or 4-day run, I think we're probably saying it the same way, just with different numbers. But that's a varied, and so let's assume that you price that at $2 a mile, right? All of a sudden, that maybe $2. Again, if you assume that $2 a mile is good, right? Just for grins and giggles. If $2 a mile is good at a 4-day run, all of a sudden it gets a lot worse when that load is if that load's a 5-day run, right? Oh, you're talking $2,800 on 700 miles. But tied up. Excuse me. Oh, I see. So you're saying $2,800 for 700 miles, but you're tied up for 3 days. So great point, right? So if your magic number is $1,000 a day, your rate per mile, again, getting back to the rate per mile bullshitters, your rate per mile looks phenomenal. The problem is your bottom line is suffering, right? Even though you got a tremendous rate per mile, your bottom line is suffering because of the component of time. So it depends. Again, if you're asking me whether it's good or bad, I would say it's not particularly good because you typically want to be somewhere around a minimum of $1,000 a day, right? Maybe somewhere around that $1,200. Where does that load take you? Now you get into that conversation about we're going to blend runs together. Maybe that's the right move. Again, this just gets really deep and it's hard to do via a live feed, but with you guys typing and me talking. Going to be some broke drivers after GATS. Is that true? No, it's not. Cost per day is phenomenal as well. Yeah, I just don't. I'm glad that you see it that way. And again, it's really difficult to have a conversation when you guys are typing and we miss a lot of the conversation. I don't know that I see it as phenomenal. I see it as useful. I see it as useful for those shorter runs. But again, I predicate my cost. I build my cost per day off of my cost per mile and the total maximum number of miles that I can run in a day. That's my time, right? So if we run 700 miles in a day at whatever our cost is, and again, that has salary included. I don't know, I see it differently. I can sit for $450 a day and go nowhere and be profitable. Okay, so stop right there. You've already identified that you know what you need per day. Fine, I got no issue with that. Again, you're not going anywhere. That's why you can sit all day for $450, assuming that I'm assuming you're making money there because you said you're profitable. If somebody were to pay me to sit, to warehouse their stuff on my trailer as an example, gotcha, good. I think that's good. So you know what that costs, you know what the costs are, right? You can break them down. 99% of the guys that I talk to, when I talk cost per day, we're not having this conversation, right? The conversation that we're having is, I'm gonna take all my fixed costs, I'm gonna divide it by 365, and that's what it's gonna cost me. I'm gonna try to guess on my variable cost as well. I'm gonna guess, I'm gonna drive 100, I'm gonna run 300 days a year, and I'm gonna drive 100,000 miles. Man, that's, I don't know. To me, that just seems really, that's just a long ways to look into the future for trucking. And like I said, my experience says, and I know because we set goals on what we want to attain for revenue and profit and reducing deadhead and total miles. Like, I track all that stuff. And so I don't think there's any way that, I'm just trying to think really quickly how often that we actually hit the numbers when we set out year end, and we've got several years worth of data to look at, to predict, and I don't know. All right, let's start to wrap this up. This is getting really long. The rate can be negotiable on loads that can't be offloaded the same day. Yeah, for sure. And again, that gets, again, if you know what your costs are to be profitable, I just think that when you start tracking cost per day, if you fall into that category often, you end up, there's so many variables that lead to guys not running a full day that would net result of that full amount of revenue. I've talked to too many guys that see it happen too frequently. Again, for the guys that are really focused on cost per mile, cost per day, really focused on their numbers, I'm not gonna tell you that you're right or wrong, right? If you found a way to use it successfully, great. My argument is that that's all you're doing is at the really basic math, just here's my cost, I'm gonna run 365 days and all this sort of stuff. It's not the best, it's not the right way to do it. Just like there's a whole lot of wrong ways, so that's a wrong way to do it, cost per day. And there's a whole lot of wrong ways to do cost per mile as well. So that's that. Cool, only lonely last question, or last two questions. Walt says, serious question, if you had a load that needed moving and Ike and his truck were available, would you offer it to him? Well, I'm not gonna go there. What I'll say is I hope Ike does awesome. I hope he does really well. And I wish the best for those guys, right? I really do. Only lonely, what will a week sitting at GATS cost? Well, so I can tell you that some of these guys that are the YouTubers and stuff, they get paid to sit. So, those guys determine that, this is what's going to cost me to sit, that sort of stuff. Now, as far as the people that are just attending, like random, those people that aren't getting paid, yeah, that could get costly. So that's it. That's all. Hey, you guys have an awesome Sunday. If you guys are one of those few that are making smiles, you guys be safe. For real. Thanks for everything all you guys do. Stay safe. Take care.